ha 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 ha. Ladies and creatures and gentlemen, the Wrestling Diaries presents to you its Ghost Stories. I am your host, Mitchell Roulette, and this is a podcast show for the average Joe. This is our spoken word sessions, and I'm being all funny and stuff in the lieu of Halloween. I'm going to do a story today about somebody sent me this. It's like of a haunting or a ghost or a possession or something about Jesus. I don't know. It might spook people off. So it might spook people off. It's like what a ghost does to you. Yeah, man, I'm going to spook you off. But anyway, don't cut that out. That's funny. So I'm going to read this real quick, though, just to promote our stuff. Check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to check out the audio, and then YouTube if you actually want to see the video content. We release weekly. We always have a show that comes out on Wednesday, and these spoken word sessions are sporadic. Sometimes they might come out on Wednesday, sometimes they might come out on Friday or Saturday, just whenever we feel like it, ladies and gents. But check that out. Check us out. Follow us, like, subscribe. Do all that stuff. Send us candy, money, whatever you want to do. Your firstborn sons. Anyways, getting on to the story. This doesn't have a title. Like I said, this lady sent this in. And here it is. I'm just going to start reading it. Here we go. I was alone in my dark bedroom, but I knew I wasn't really alone. There was an unseen presence in the darkness. I knew I was being watched by an invisible, peeping Tom. I felt violated. I was being stalked by a relentless intruder in my own home. This was not a nightmare. It was living my dream in my dream home. I had always dreamed of living in an old Victorian-era home. I dreamed about this with my conscious mind, but I also dreamed about it with my subconscious mind. I had a dream about living in a huge old home with my family. I don't remember all the details, but I do remember that the home was beautiful and grand. That dream came true in November of 1991, when my now ex-husband, my 2 children, and I moved into an 1890 Queen Victorian home in the historic district of Americus, Georgia. Dreams realized are seldom exactly as imagined. This dream turned out to have a distinctly nightmarish quality. The house was very tall and had an imposing tower or turret on top. I loved the style. It was so extremely Victorian and classic. The home needed a lot of work, but it had excellent bones. It was almost 4,000 square feet of superior craftsmanship. The ceilings were 14 feet high. The floors were made of beautiful heart pine, and the original woodwork throughout the house was almost virginal. We all fell in love with the house. The day we moved in was so exciting because we bought more than just a house. We purchased a piece of history. History usually involves death. Since the house was over 100 years old, we assumed people had died there. In fact, our realtor shared a personal memory of the house. As a child, she came there for a viewing when someone died. She pointed out the specific spot in the front parlor where the body was laid out. I thought about the story almost every time I walked into that room. Unlike horror movies about the paranormal, events unfolded slowly, sometimes methodically, and sometimes sporadically in this personal haunting. I didn't accept what was happening until I could no longer ignore it. I didn't believe in ghosts. It didn't fit into my Christian worldview. There were certain rooms that were hot spots of activity, the front parlor and my bedroom. Both rooms were the most unique and beautiful rooms in the house. One night, we heard a loud crash that came from the parlor. We ran from the back of the house and found 3 books on the floor hallway across the room. The books had fallen from the bookcase. They were face down with the pages splayed open. No one was in the room. It didn't seem possible that they could have fallen on their own. A I put the books back in place, shrugged my shoulders, and went back to what I was doing. A few nights later, my family and I walked in the door after having dinner out, and the same 3 books were on the floor again. I picked up the books once more and tried to believe it was a coincidence. The next night, my kids and I were alone. We heard another loud crash, and my heart sank. The same 3 books were on the floor. My 6-year-old daughter began to wail, "I don't want to live here anymore." It was about 10 at night, but I wasn't going to wait until the morning. I called our pastor. He came over and prayed through the house. The books remained on the shelf after that night. My bedroom was the one located underneath the tower. It had a huge bay window under the turret. My bed was perfectly wedged into the bay window. My husband worked nights, so I slept alone most of the time. I began to wake up from a deep sleep to a full awakening with a sensation of something sitting on the bed right beside me. The first time it happened, I was absolutely terrified. I thought that someone was there. When I looked around, I saw no one, and that scared me even more. It continued to happen for months, sometimes multiple times a night. My next fear was that I was going crazy. I did not tell anyone what was happening. My parents came for a visit. My mom slept in my room, and I slept downstairs. When she got up the next morning, she said, "Vicky, something is in that room." My response was, "I know." She said, "It sat on the bed with me." Cold chills rippled through my body. I was relieved because I knew that I was not crazy, and it didn't just happen to me, but I was also petrified. Night after night, this unseen bed sitter tormented me. I became sleep deprived. There was one memorable night when it happened so many times that I would barely doze off before it would awaken me again. It was maddening. In fact, I was no longer afraid. I was furious. I stood up in the middle of my room, stomped my foot, and screamed, "Get out of my house in Jesus' name! Don't ever come back!" Believe it or not, that was the last time it happened. We continued to live in the house for 6 years. The paranormal activity stopped after I literally put my foot down. Our reason for moving had nothing to do with spirits. There was an earthlier concern. It cost a fortune to heat and cool that house. Our utility bills were higher than our house payment. I believe in spirits, but I am not sure they are the souls of the deceased. I am increasingly convinced that these spirits are soulless entities that have never been human. This experience and others that followed left me with more questions than answers. But I know this: the horror movies are all wrong. A real haunting is subtle and sporadic. Subtle is much more scary than overblown special Dort 4 effects. Subtle is scary because it messes with your mind. It causes you to wonder if you are imagining the encounters and losing your grip on reality. Sporadic is frightening because as soon as you begin to feel comfortable, something creepy happens. You always feel on edge, and you never truly feel alone. I learned to not be afraid, or at least to show no fear. I learned to stand my ground. The dream house was part nightmare. Strangely, my kids and I still dream about that house on a regular basis. The impact of that house lives on in our dreams. Ooh, did anybody get scared by that? I agree with her, though. I absolutely 100% agree. When things happen subtly and sporadically, it is more scary because it's also scary in a sense of individual scariness, because then you're questioning your own sanity, right? Like, can you imagine all the times, anybody listening to this or watching this, and myself included, all the times that something weird happened and then you're like, wait, did something weird, like something out of the normal just happen, and something paranormal just happened? Did I witness something? And then you're like, no, it couldn't be. But then you wonder, right? And then if you talk to it about somebody, people are like, no, dude, it was just the wind. It was just, there's so many, there's a lot of scientific explanations for things, lots. And then sometimes we fool our own selves, like our mind makes up things. We get scared, we scare ourselves, and we kind of, I don't know, we kind of orchestrate things to happen. But then it also makes you wonder, like, what if it's not? What if there was like a ghost or a spirit or some kind of entity or something like that? It begs a really good question. So I agree completely with her, because if stuff just like, there's like the walls are bleeding. Like, what was that in The Shining? The walls are bleeding, or the floor is breathing, like the telltale heart, or not breathing, but the heartbeat in the floor. I mean, obviously these things are very, they're like a mummy's coming out of the closet. Obviously, that's going to be pretty dramatic. But stuff that, like a book falling off the bookshelf. What are some of the weird things that have happened to you that you haven't? Maybe it's something more blatant, like what this lady was talking about in the story. I hope everybody enjoyed that story. I sure did. As always, like, comment, share, subscribe on our YouTube, and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Overcast and Google Podcast and all those other platforms where you get more stories. Today's episode was about a little scary story that someone sent me in. And next time I'm going to read some poetry that my sister sent in. So anyway, what do you wrestle with? And how can you beat it? How can you beat the ghost and the demons that you wrestle with? One love.